Picture yourself in a dimly lit room, the kind where shadows flicker like secrets on the walls. You're curled up maybe with a fan humming softly, its white noise a gentle nudge towards sleep. Before we dive into the grim, absurd tale of Henry VIII's final days, take a second to hit that like button if you're into unravelling history's weirder corners. Drop a comment too. Where are you tuning in from and what's the clock saying? It's wild to think we're all scattered across the globe chasing the same strange stories. Now settle in. Let's wander back to Tudor England, where a king's collapse was as epic as his ego. Henry VIII. The Tudor Titan wasn't always a wheezing, ulcer-riddled wreck. Rewind to his prime, and you'd see a man who could have stepped out of a Renaissance rom-com. Tall, broad-shouldered, with legs that made tights look like high fashion, he was the golden boy of 16th century England. He jousted, hunted, and charmed his way through court, his charisma so potent you could almost forgive his habit of lopping off heads. But fast forward to the 1540s, and that heartthrob had morphed into something else entirely, a groaning 300-pound monument to excess waddling through Whitehall like a velvet-draped landslide. His decline wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a public spectacle complete with a stench that could clear a room. By his final years, Henry's body was a battlefield of ailments. His midsection had ballooned straining doublets that groaned under the pressure. Chronic leg ulcers oozing and foul turned every step into a grimace-worthy ordeal. Gout flared in his joints, each twinge a reminder of too many feasts. His diet, think whole roasted swans drowned in gravy, didn't help. Neither did the barrels of red wine he guzzled like a man trying to drown his own mortality. You can almost hear his knees creaking, sounding like a sack of gravel with every move. Yet despite the pain, Henry clung to his image as God's chosen king, his ego as inflated as his waistline. The court, ever loyal to the myth of majesty, played along. Portraits still painted him as virile, his shoulders squared his codpiece defiantly prominent. Never mind that he couldn't climb stairs or mount a horse without a small army of attendants and a prayer. His tailors worked miracles stitching outfits that hid the decay beneath layers of silk and denial. But you can't outrun reality forever, and Henry's was catching up fast. His body was failing, his temper fraying, and his court tiptoeing around the truth the king was rotting, and no amount of gold could stop it. What happens when a monarch's myth crumbles under the weight of his own flesh? Let's find out. Imagine sitting in a grand hall, the air thick with the scent of wax candles and desperation. You're a courtier forced to stand near Henry VIII, and there's a smell, a sour, acrid whiff that makes your eyes water. It's not the unwashed masses or a forgotten banquet platter. It's the king himself, or rather his legs. Those infamous leg ulcers festering like Tudor urban legends were the grim stars of Henry's final act. They didn't just torment him, they turned every court gathering into a test of endurance for anyone with a functioning nose. These weren't your garden variety sores. They started decades earlier, likely from a jousting accident in his 30s that left his legs battered. By the 1540s, those injuries had festered into deep oozing wounds that refused to heal. Picture raw inflamed flesh leaking a steady drip of pus and fluid wrapped in silk stockings that did little to mask the horror. The ulcers were so severe, some said you could glimpse bone beneath the mess. The smell, like a 14th century tavern's worst day, a mix of rot and regret that drifted across rooms. Ambassadors used to diplomatic tact dreaded audiences not for Henry's temper, but for the stench wafting from his throne. You'd think a king's court would whisper about such things, but no one dared. To mention the ulcers was to risk a one-way trip to the tower, yet the evidence was inescapable. Visitors winced from across the chamber. Courtiers mastered the art of subtle retreats, edging backward mid-bow. Even the French ambassador, no stranger to courtly intrigue, reportedly clutched a perfume cloth to his face, praying for a quick exit. Henry, meanwhile, sat in grim denial, his legs propped on cushions, his pride propped on the myth of divine invincibility. The ulcers didn't just stink, they ruled his life. Walking was a distant memory, each step a stab of agony. Riding was out of the question, his warhorses probably sighed in relief. The sores kept him tethered to chairs, his world shrinking to the distance his attendants could carry him, and the pain, relentless gnawing enough to make a lesser man beg for mercy. Henry didn't beg, but his mood swings sharp as the axes he favoured told the story. How do you run a kingdom when your own body betrays you? For Henry, The answer was grim determination. A lot of yelling and a court too scared to admit the king was falling apart. You're in a candlelit chamber at Whitehall, the air heavy with the scent of herbs and hopelessness. Somewhere nearby, Henry VIII grimaces, his ulcerated legs throbbing like a drumbeat of doom. The finest physicians in Tudor England huddle around him, their faces a mix of fear and futility. You'd think the 16th century's best minds could fix a king, but their treatments were less science, and more like a grim game of guesswork. Spoiler, the king's not getting better, and the doctors are sweating bullets. These weren't modern surgeons with sterile tools, they were Tudor doctors armed with herbs, prayers, and a shaky grasp of anatomy. For Henry's oozing leg ulcers, they tried everything short of witchcraft, though you wouldn't be surprised if someone suggested it. Honey poultices slathered on like a desperate chef's glaze were meant to draw out infection, but mostly just attracted flies. Rose oil church approved and wildly expensive was drizzled over the sores, adding a floral note to the stench of decay. Cauterization was the real crowd pleaser. They'd heat a blade red hot and sear the wounds shut. You can almost hear Henry's bellows loud enough to rattle the tapestries as the room filled with the smell of scorched flesh. Then came the lancing, a daily ritual as brutal as it sounds. Picture a physician hands trembling, slicing into the king's swollen legs to drain the pus. The cloths used to mop up the mess were soaked in what courtiers politely called royal ooze, then whisked away to be burned. Every morning some poor doctor had to shuffle in bow and say, "Good day, your majesty, time to stab your legs again." No wonder they aged like milk left out in July. These treatments weren't just ineffective, they were torture costing a fortune in linen and nerve. The ulcers kept festering, the pain kept growing, and Henry's temper kept everyone on edge. You've got to feel for the physicians, though. Failure wasn't just a bad day at work, it could mean exile or a date with the executioner. They threw every remedy at the problem, from herbal compresses to muttered prayers hoping for a miracle. But miracles were in short supply, and Henry's legs were a lost cause. The best they could do was keep the king alive, if not comfortable, while the court pretended he was still the Lion of England. What's it like to treat a monarch when every cut risks your neck? For these doctors, it was a daily dance with disaster, and the music was about to get louder. Step into the great hall of Hampton Court, where the air smells of roasted meat and reckless ambition. You're watching Henry VIII at a banquet, his table groaning under platters that could feed a village. His appetite wasn't just legendary, it was a one-man siege on the kingdom's livestock. By the 1540s, with his body crumbling and his ulcers screaming, Henry ate like a man trying to outrun death itself. Every bite was a defiance of his failing flesh, and every meal a monument to Tudor excess. Buckle up, because this diet's a wild ride. Breakfast alone was a spectacle. Picture hunks of beef, a dozen eggs, and white bread soaked in ale all before noon. A roasted partridge might make a cameo just to keep things classy. Lunch and dinner, more of the same but bigger. Roasted swan, venison, lamb, eel pies, each dish drowned in gravy so thick it could double as mortar. Vegetables, only if they were garnish or accidentally stuck to the roast. Fruit was for peasants, not kings. Red wine flowed like a river, gallons of it daily, because water was for washing wounds, not drinking. In Henry's mind, meat equalled majesty, and he was going to eat his way to divinity. This wasn't just indulgence, it was a feedback loop of doom. The richer the food, the worse his gout flared his joints, creaking like old floorboards. His digestion, never a team player, turned volatile, bloating cramps and groans, loud enough to set the court's clocks. By his final years, his rotting teeth made chewing a chore, so servants pre-cut his food, turning banquets into a grim exercise in logistics. Lifting a turkey leg was practically cardio, and Henry wasn't training for the Olympics. His meals fed not just him, but an army of courtiers, tasters and musicians, yet he still ate like every plate was his last. You can't help but marvel at the stubbornness. Doctors begged him to ease up, maybe try a carrot or two, but Henry doubled down. His diet fueled his ulcers, piled pressure on his wounds, and sent his mood swinging like a chandelier in a storm. The court watched forks paused as their king ate himself into oblivion, his body, a ticking clock of excess. How do you rule a nation when your stomach's staging a revolt? For Henry, the answer was simple. Keep eating, keep shouting, and let the servants clean up the mess. You're standing in the echoing halls of Whitehall Palace, where the clatter of armour has been replaced by the creak of something far less heroic. Henry VIII, once the jousting star of Tudor England, is now a king who moves only with the help of pulleys and prayers. By the 1540s, his body swollen to over 300 pounds, and betrayed by festering leg ulcers, has turned him into a royal relic too heavy for his own throne. It's a grim sight, but there's a dark comedy in how a monarch's might crumbles under gravity's unyielding grip. Gone are the days when Henry strutted through tournaments, his codpiece gleaming like a battle standard. Now getting him out of bed is a logistical nightmare. Picture a team of attendants, faces tight with effort, hauling him upright with ropes and sheer willpower. Royal engineers, probably wishing they'd stuck to building bridges, crafted a mechanical chair part throne, part reinforced cart to shuttle him through the palace. You can almost hear the wheels groaning each turn, a reminder of the king's lost agility. His armour, once forged for war, is now a custom brace to hold his bulk together, the sleeves roomy enough to hide a small diplomat. Mounting a horse? That's a fantasy from another decade. They tried a hoist system, a literal crane for a king to lift him into the saddle. The horses, no fools, likely dreamed of lighter duties. Exercise, once a noble pursuit, is now a myth. Henry's only movement comes from swivelling to bark orders, and even that leaves him winded. His doctors tiptoeing around his temper suggest gentle strolls a few steps to keep the blood flowing. But Henry prefers the calorie burn of political rants, his voice thundering while his body stays rooted. The court adjusts, scheduling entire days around how far he can be rolled, ceremonies shortened to keep him seated. This immobility isn't just inconvenient, it's a death spiral. Inactivity worsens his circulation, making his ulcers throb harder. His digestive system, already a battlefield, grumbles in protest. His mood, tethered to his pain, swings like a pendulum, and woe to the courtier caught in its path. You can't help but wonder, how does a king rule when he can't even stand? For Henry, it's a mix of stubborn pride and a court too scared to admit their lion is more statue than sovereign. The palace hums with the tension of a kingdom tethered to a failing frame. Imagine lingering in a Tudor throne room, the air thick with the scent of beeswax and dread. You're a courtier trying to focus on Henry V's latest decree, but there's a problem: the king smells like a plague pit on a bad day. By his final years, Henry's infamous leg ulcers have turned him into a walking, or rather sitting, biohazard. The stench arrives before he does a sour rotting cloud that makes even the bravest ambassador rethink their career. It's not just a smell, it's a presence, and it's rewriting the rules of royal etiquette. These ulcers, cavernous and oozing, are no minor inconvenience. They're festering craters wrapped in silk stockings that do less to hide the horror than to mock it. The smell, a mix of decay, sweat, and something unnameably worse, clings to the velvet drapes and haunts the corridors. Courtiers perfect the art of the subtle sidestep, backing away mid-conversation with practiced grace. Ambassadors, clutching perfumed cloths like lifelines, endure audiences with the focus of soldiers in a siege. You'd think someone would mention it, but wrinkling your nose near Henry could land you in the tower, or worse, on bandage duty. Those unsung heroes who changed his dressings deserve a medal, or at least a very long bath. Hygiene, never a Tudor strong suit, is a lost cause for Henry. Bathing is a theory, not a practice, when you can't move and pain is your constant companion. Instead, he relies on powders, oils and layers of linen to mummify the problem. His clothes soaked in royal misery are burned after useless laundry, more ritual sacrifice. The physicians try their best slathering on honey dressings and herbal compresses, but it's like perfuming a landfill. The stench persists, a grim reminder that even kings can't outrun their own decay. You've got to marvel at the court's denial. No one dares acknowledge the obvious not when Henry's still signing execution orders. The palace hums with whispered strategies: stand upwind, breathe shallowly, pray for a short meeting. Yet beneath the silence there's a shared truth: the king's body is failing and its rebellion is as public as his crown. How do you serve a monarch whose presence is a punishment? For Henry's court, it's a daily exercise in loyalty, nausea, and the art of holding your breath. You're in the shadowed heart of Whitehall, where the air crackles with tension thicker than the tapestries. Henry VIII, once the charming king who danced through courts, is now a tempest in a throne, his mood swinging like an axe at a chopping block. By the 1540s, his leg ulcers and endless pain have turned him into a volcano of rage and sorrow, ready to erupt at the slightest provocation. You're a courtier watching his eyebrow twitch, wondering if it's time to duck or pray. It's not just a bad day, it's a kingdom teetering on the edge of a king's breaking mind. Henry wasn't always this unpredictable. In his youth, he was the life of the party, tossing quips and loots with equal flair. But now pain is his constant shadow, gnawing at his legs and his patience. One moment he's weeping over Jane Seymour, his lost love tears soaking his velvet sleeves. The next he's roaring accusations of treason because someone coughed too loudly. You can almost feel the court's collective flinch servants decoding his frowns like sailors reading storm clouds. Is he plotting war or just wrestling with last night's eel pie? No one's sure, but everyone's scared. Some whisper it's more than pain. A jousting accident in 1536 might have rattled his skull, leaving scars deeper than the ones on his legs. Others guess it's the weight of ruling, or maybe a darkness no leech can bleed away. Whatever the cause, his volatility rules the palace. Courtiers tiptoe, advisors nod like puppets, and even his dogs seem to tread lightly. One wrong word could mean exile, a cell, or a very permanent haircut. His old friend Thomas More learned that the hard way his loyalty no match for Henry's paranoia. The king's rage is now his sceptre, and it's reshaping England one outburst at a time. You've got to wonder what it's like to serve a man whose heart is as unsteady as his throne. The court's a stage, and everyone's playing a part, smiling through the fear. Henry's still signing laws and planning wars, but his mind's a maze of pain and pride. The man who broke with Rome is breaking himself, and no one dares say it. How do you steer a kingdom when your king's a storm? For now the answer is simple. Keep your head down, your mouth shut, and hope the next tantrum spares you. Picture yourself in a hushed chamber at Whitehall, January 1547, where the air's heavy with the scent of wax and worry. Henry VIII lies bedridden, a mountain of embroidered cushions barely containing his swollen, failing body. His breaths are laboured, his legs a throbbing ruin, yet the court pretends he's just taking a very long nap. No one says dying, not when predicting the king's death is treason, and the executioner's axe is sharper than the truth. You're there watching a kingdom hold its breath, caught in a dance of denial as absurd as it is grim. Henry's world has shrunk to this bed, his once mighty frame tethered to linens and pain. He hasn't walked in weeks, hasn't ridden in years, and his appetite, still heroic by Tudor standards, is waning. But he's not done yet. Propped up, he scrawls orders, tweaks his will, and sets a regency council for his 9-year-old son Edward, who's about to inherit a throne and a mountain of debt. His pen moves with the stubbornness of a man who thinks he can outright death itself. The court plays along, calling his state reflective or vigorous digestion anything but the end. You can almost hear the rats in the floorboards whispering what no one dares. The physicians are the real actors here, their faces masks of cautious optimism. One mutters, "His Majesty shall recover, God willing," a line so vague it's practically poetry. They tiptoe around the truth, knowing a wrong word could cost their heads. Meanwhile, Henry drifts maybe dreaming of roast goose or Protestant plots. The court's euphemisms are a fortress shielding the illusion of an immortal king. No one mentions last rites or funerals, those words are as dangerous as a drawn sword. Even as his body shuts down, the palace hums with paperwork and pretense, every quill stroke a defiance of the inevitable. You can't help but marvel at the absurdity. A king dissolving in his own bed still rules through sheer momentum. His court's loyalty or fear keeps the charade alive, but the cracks are showing. Servants glance at each other. Nobles clutch their rosaries, and the air grows heavier with what's unsaid. How do you mourn a monarch when saying he's mortal is a crime? For now, Henry clings to life his will as iron as his body is frail, and the court waits for the moment when silence becomes strategy. You're in Whitehall Palace, January 28th, 1547, standing in a room so quiet you can hear your own heartbeat. Henry VIII has just stopped breathing his massive frame, still beneath a sea of embroidered linens. The air's thick with the scent of candle wax and unspoken panic. No one weeps, no trumpets sound, because saying the king is dead is treason, and nobody's eager to test the law's sharp edges. You're a courtier frozen in place, watching a kingdom teeter on the edge of a truth too dangerous to name. It's not a funeral. It's a conspiracy of silence. The room doesn't erupt. It pauses like a held breath. Doctors, courtiers and clergymen exchange glances, each waiting for someone else to blink first. Henry's body lies there, a monument to excess, now eerily still, but the law says he's not dead until someone with a title says so. You can almost feel the weight of Tudor bureaucracy grinding against reality. No one dares speak the word corpse. Instead, they mutter about resting deeply, or His Majesty's repose as if he's just napping through a bad batch of venison. The silence is deafening and the stakes are deadly. For days the court plays this grim charade. They don't announce his death not out of love but strategy. The succession needs securing. and 9-year-old Edward Henry's frail heir must be prepped to inherit a throne and a tangle of enemies. Ministers scurry, sealing documents and whispering plans, all while pretending Henry's just unavailable. You'd laugh if it weren't so tense. Foreign ambassadors sniffing something's off get polite smiles and vague promises. The palace hums with quiet chaos, mourning clothes ordered in secret seals tweaked, and opportunists already eyeing Edward's court like vultures. Even the rats seem to know change is coming. You can't help but marvel at the absurdity. A king once louder than cannon fire now lies silent, yet his power lingers like a ghost. The court's fear of his shadow keeps England in limbo, a nation led by a man who's legally alive but biologically past tense. How do you shift a kingdom when the law demands denial? For now, the answer is a tight-lipped dance of nods and hushed orders, as Henry's legacy, equal parts glory and gore, waits to be unpacked. Picture yourself in a chilly procession, winding toward Windsor, the air sharp with frost and the stench of disaster. It's early February 1547, and Henry VIII's coffin, a creaking wooden giant, rumbles along, trailed by nobles in black who'd rather be anywhere else. You're among them, your boots sinking into the mud, your nose assaulted by a smell that's less royal and more rotting nightmare. The king's funeral was meant to be grand, but biology and bad carpentry have other plans. This isn't a send-off, it's a scandal on wheels. Henry's body, all 300+ pounds of it, wasn't built for a graceful exit. Embalmers stuffed it with spices, cinnamon, cloves, the works, hoping to mask the decay. They wrapped it in cloth like a royal burrito, but Tudor embalming's no match for a corpse this stubborn. The coffin sealed in haste starts to leak a black putrid ooze seeping from its base. You can see it staining the cart at a stopover in Sion Abbey, the smell so vile it spooks the horses. Whispers spread of stray dogs licking the drippings, yes, dogs snacking on the former head of the Church of England. You'd gag if you weren't so stunned. The nobles keep marching faces stiff as their starched ruffs pretending they don't smell a thing. No one mentions the coffin's cracks or the gases swelling it like a bad barrel. This was supposed to be a solemn farewell, not a horror show. Some mutter it's divine payback for Henry's cruelties, others just want the day over. At Windsor, he's laid to rest in St. George's Chapel, not in a golden tomb, but a plain vault under the floor next to Jane Seymour, the wife who didn't live to annoy him. No grand monument, no marble effigy, just a slab unmarked for a century until the Victorians bothered to label it. You can't help but savour the irony. The man who shook Europe broke with Rome and ate entire forests of game lies in a grave as humble as a merchant's. His thunderous life ends in a whisper, his legacy trampled by tourists' boots. How do you bury a king who defined excess? For Henry, it's with a leaking coffin, a muted ceremony and a final twist of fate that proves even monarchs can't escape the mess of being human. You're standing in the marble heart of ancient Rome, where the air hums with whispers and the scent of olive oil and ambition. The year's somewhere in the early 1st century, and Valeria Messalina, barely a teenager, is already a spark in a city of wildfires. Born into the Claudian dynasty, she's got imperial blood in her veins, the kind that comes with a side of daggers and double crosses. You can almost see her, a girl with sharp eyes and sharper dreams, navigating a world where power's the only currency, and loyalty's just a pretty lie. This is where her story begins, and trust me, it's a wild ride. Messalina's family isn't your average Roman clan swapping recipes over dinner. Her great-uncle was Emperor Tiberius, a grim old schemer who ruled with a scowl. Her cousin none other than Nero, the future fiddle-playing firestarter. This is a household where family reunions mean plotting coups, and every handshake hides a blade. Growing up in this snake pit, Messalina learns fast trust is a luxury, appearances are armour, and a well-timed smile can shift the board. Rome's a glittering cage of luxury and corruption, and she's already memorising its rules like a gladiator studies his opponent's moves. At just 15, she's married off to her cousin, Tiberius Claudius Drusus Claudius. To history, a man most Romans see as a stuttering, limping afterthought. He's awkward bookish, the kind of guy you'd expect to trip over his own toga at a banquet. Nobody bets on him becoming emperor. He's more likely to be found buried in scrolls than leading legions, but Messalina. She sees potential, or maybe just opportunity. You can picture her at the wedding, her veil hiding a smirk, already calculating how to turn this unlikely match into her ticket to the top. In a city where virtue's praised in public and trashed in private, she's ready to play dirty. You've got to wonder what it's like to grow up knowing your bloodline's a battlefield. Messalina's not just a girl, she's a chess piece in Rome's endless game, and she's learning to move like a queen. Her story's about to take off from a dynastic pawn to a name that'll echo through history as both legend and warning. How do you thrive in a world where every ally's a potential traitor? For Messalina, it's simple. Sharpen your wits, polish your charm, and never let them see you sweat. You're in the golden sprawl of Rome's imperial palace, where every whisper's a weapon and every shadow hides a scheme. It's around 41 CE, and Valeria Messalina, barely in her 20s, has just become empress. Her husband Claudius, the unlikely emperor, has stumbled into power after Caligula's bloody exit, and Messalina's not wasting a second. You can see her gliding through the halls, all youthful charm and razor-sharp ambition, rewriting her role from ceremonial arm candy to the puppet master of Rome. This isn't a fairy tale, it's a high-stakes thriller, and she's the star. Forget the Roman ideal of the demure empress, all modesty and quiet grace. Messalina's got bigger plans. She's not content to sit pretty beside Claudius, nodding at his decrees. She's whispering in his ear, steering his decisions like a captain at the helm of a storm-tossed ship. Marriages, arranged alliances, forged enemies, quietly dispatched. She's playing chess while the court's still fumbling with checkers. Her beauty's a weapon, her smile a trap, and her mind sharp enough to cut through the thickest Roman intrigue. You can almost hear the senators muttering half in awe, half in fear, as she reshapes the palace in her image. But it's the rumours that make her infamous. Ancient historians, grumpy old men with grudges, paint her as Rome's ultimate femme fatale, sneaking out at night to work in brothels, outshining the professionals, before slipping back to the palace by dawn. True or not, these tales stick like wine stains on a toga. They say she's got an appetite for power and pleasure that'd make Bacchus blush her lovers, a roster of senators and nobles who know crossing her means exile or worse. Claudius, distracted by scrolls and court squabbles, seems oblivious, or maybe he's just too smitten to care. You've got to wonder, is she a mastermind or a myth spun by her enemies? You can't help but feel the tension in the air like a bowstring pulled taut. Messalina's walking a tightrope, balancing charm, fear, and secrets, in a city where gossip travels faster than chariots. She's not just surviving Rome's deadly game, she's rewriting the rules, turning her bedroom into a boardroom and her whispers into law. How do you rule an empire from the shadows? For Messalina, it's a dance of seduction and strategy, but the music's getting darker and the knives are already out. You're lurking in the torchlit corridors of Rome's imperial palace, where the air's thick with incense and intrigue. It's the early 40s CE, and Valeria Messalina, empress and master schemer, is turning the eternal city into her personal chessboard. She's not just Claudius's wife, she's the whisper behind every decree, the shadow behind every promotion. But it's the rumours of her bedroom exploits that set tongues wagging and senators sweating. You can almost see her all silken charm and steely intent, using seduction like a blade to carve her empire. This isn't love, it's strategy, and Messalina's playing to win. Forget the poet's odes to chaste Roman matrons. Messalina's lovers aren't starry-eyed suitors. They're pawns in her power game. Senators, equestrians, noble heirs, if they're useful, they're hers. The old historians with their quills dipped in venom claim she'd slip out to brothels, trading the palace for a night of scandal under a fake name. Maybe it's true, maybe it's slander, but one thing's clear, her affairs are calculated. Sleep with Messalina, and you might wake up with a shiny new title or a legion at your back. Cross her and you're exiled faster than you can say toga. You can feel the court's pulse quicken, every glance a question, every handshake a risk. Claudius. Poor Claudius is the odd man out. He's buried in paperwork, wrestling with a fractious senate, too distracted or too devoted to notice the whispers. Or maybe he's just willfully blind, clinging to the image of his loyal young wife. Messalina plays the part to perfection, doting in public, all soft smiles and clasped hands, while behind closed doors she's spinning webs that'd make a spider jealous. You've got to wonder if he suspects, if he catches the sidelong glances, or the snickers in the bathhouses. But Rome knows. The forums buzz, the taverns hum, and Messalina's legend grows half scandal, half awe. You can't help but marvel at her nerve. In a city where one wrong step means a knife in the dark, she's dancing on a razor's edge, turning desire into dominance. Her body's a weapon, her bedroom a war room, and every tryst a treaty signed in whispers. How do you hold an empire in your thrall when your name's a punchline? For Messalina, it's simple. keep them guessing, keep them wanting, and never let them see the trap until it snaps shut. But the whispers are getting louder, and even queens can't silence a city forever. You're in the gilded snake pit of Rome's imperial court, where every smile hides a dagger and every word's a weapon. Valeria Messalina, Empress and Puppet Master, isn't just playing the game of power, she's rewriting the rules. By the mid-40s CE, she's got Claudius wrapped around her finger, but it's her enemies who feel her real grip. You can see her all youthful poise and icy resolve, orchestrating purges with the precision of a gladiator landing a killing blow. This isn't politics as usual, it's a masterclass in ruthlessness, and Messalina's the star pupil. Her favourite trick, the well-placed lie. With Claudius distracted, buried in scrolls, or fretting over his shaky throne, she spins tales of treason and scandal. A senator's too popular, whisper he's plotting a coup. A noblewoman's too outspoken, accuse her of adultery. The charges don't need proof. Messalina's word is poison enough. You can almost hear the condemned pleading as they're dragged to exile execution, or a quiet suicide, their only crime being inconvenient. Her reach is surgical, her timing deadly, and the body counts rising faster than Rome's grain prices. She doesn't work alone. Messalina's built a network of loyal cronies, corrupt freedmen, slimy magistrates, informants who'd sell their own mothers for a pat on the head. There are eyes, ears, and knives sniffing out threats and tightening her grip on the palace. Claudius, ever the trusting scholar, signs their death warrants without a second glance, oblivious that he's axing his own allies. You've got to feel a chill at her cunning. She's not just eliminating rivals, she's reshaping Rome in her image, one whispered lie at a time. Even her motherhood's a shield. Her son Britannicus, heir to the throne, makes her untouchable, the empress who birthed Rome's future. But you can sense the cracks forming. Every enemy she buries plants a seed of resentment. Her allies, gorged on spoil, start muttering about her recklessness. The court's a tinderbox, and Messalina's piling on the kindling. How do you rule through fear when fear turns on you? For now she's untouchable, a queen of shadows and secrets. But Rome's a city that loves to devour its own. The higher she climbs, the harder the fall, and the whispers are already sharpening into blades. You're skulking through the marble maze of Rome's imperial palace, where the air's thick with the scent of myrrh and menace. It's the mid-40s CE and Valeria Messalina Empress, and Master Manipulator is riding high, but the ground's starting to shake beneath her. Her web of lies, lovers and purges has made her untouchable, but it's also breeding enemies faster than Rome's rats. You can feel the tension like a bowstring pulled too tight, as her allies grow restless and her foes sharpen their knives. This isn't just a court, it's a powder keg, and Messalina's dancing on the fuse. She's been ruthless, no question. Senators exiled noblewomen, silenced entire families, erased all because they crossed her or looked like they might. Her network of cronies, freedmen, informants and toadying magistrates keeps the machine humming, but even they're starting to flinch. You can picture them whispering in the bathhouses, their loyalty fraying as her schemes get bolder. Messalina's not just playing with power, she's juggling torches and the court's starting to smell smoke. Her son Britannicus, the imperial heir, keeps her shielded, but shields don't stop whispers, and Rome's buzzing with them. Enter Narcissus the freedman with a grin like a fox in the emperor's ear. He's no ordinary lackey managing Claudius's letters and visitors. He's got more pull than most senators. For years he's tolerated Messalina's games, maybe even profited from them. But now her recklessness is a threat not just to him, but to the empire's shaky scaffolding. You can see him in the shadows, his eyes narrowing as he tracks her moves. He's not alone, every rival she's crushed, every noble she's humiliated is waiting for her to slip. The court's a chessboard, and Messalina's knocked over too many pieces to keep the game tidy. You can't help but feel the irony. Messalina's built an empire of fear, but fear's a fickle friend. Her allies fat on her favours are starting to wonder if she's more liability than leader. Her enemies, once scattered, are circling their patience as sharp as their grudges. How do you hold a throne when the ground's crumbling under you? For Messalina, it's a high-wire act, each step riskier than the last, and the crowd's no longer cheering, they're watching for the fall. You're in the heart of Rome, 48 CE, where the air's electric with betrayal and the scent of spilled wine. Valeria Messalina, Empress and Queen of Schemes, has just made her boldest move yet, and it's about to snap the threads of her empire. No longer content pulling strings from the shadows, she's aiming for the throne itself, or at least a new man to sit on it. You can see her all fire and audacity, plotting a coup that's either genius or madness. The palace feels like a stage and the curtain's about to fall on her final act. Her partner in this gamble is Gaius Silius, a senator with charm, wealth, and enough ambition to match her own. He's not just a lover, he's her ticket to a new power structure. The story goes, thanks to Tacitus, who never met a scandal he didn't love, that Messalina married Silius in a public ceremony, while Claudius was still emperor alive and clueless. Picture the scene of brazen wedding garlands and vows with Rome's elite gawking and whispering. It's a move so wild it could either crown her or bury her. You've got to admire the nerve even if it smells like disaster. Narcissus Claudius's sharp-eyed freedman catches wind of the plot and he's not playing games. He gathers evidence, documents, witnesses, maybe even a guest list from that rogue wedding and moves fast. You can almost hear the Praetorian Guard's boots clanging as he rallies them, building a case so ironclad even Claudius can't ignore it. When the emperor hears of his wife's betrayal, it's like a thunderclap. Disbelief gives way to rage and Messalina's house of cards starts to collapse. She's been outmaneuvered, her secrets laid bare in a city that thrives on them. You can't help but feel the tragic weight. Messalina, who ruled Rome with whispers and wiles, overplayed her hand. The knives she sharpened for others are now aimed at her crown. How do you survive when your own ambition betrays you? For Messalina, the answer's grim. The empire she shaped is turning and the fall is as swift as it is brutal. Her legend, part scandal, part genius, ends not with a throne but with a reckoning as Rome's wolves close in. You're settling into a cosy corner maybe with a cup of tea and the hum of a fan to keep things calm. Before we dive into the messy human side of America's founding fathers, hit that like button if you love peeling back history's glossy veneer. Drop a comment too, where are you joining us from? And what's the vibe tonight? It's wild to think we're all here, scattered across time zones, unravelling the secrets of men who shaped a nation. Now let's step into the 18th century, where heroes were just as flawed as the rest of us. The founding fathers, Washington, Franklin, Adams and the gang, are often painted as marble statues, all stoic virtue and powdered wigs. Schoolbooks sell them as the wise architects of liberty signing declarations with quills dipped in destiny. But behind the parchment and patriotism, they were men, not myths, wrestling with doubts, desires, and some seriously questionable choices. You can almost smell the tobacco smoke and ambition in those Philadelphia meeting rooms, where they preached equality while living lives tangled in contradictions, slavery affairs and secrets they burned letters to hide. This story isn't about their grand speeches or shiny monuments. It's about the shadows they cast, the love letters tucked away, the moral compromises swept under rugs, the tempers and insecurities they hid behind stern portraits. These men built a nation on ideals of freedom, but their private lives were a messier affair full of scandals that'd make a tabloid blush. You're standing at the edge of their world where public glory meets private grit. How do you forge a republic when your own house is a mess? Let's pull back the curtain and find out. You're in a bustling 18th century tavern, the air thick with the scent of ale and ink. Benjamin Franklin's at the bar, his eyes twinkling like he's just invented electricity itself. He's not the kite-flying saint of your history class. This Franklin's a rogue all charm and mischief with a wit sharper than a printing press. You can almost hear his laugh loud and sly as he flirts his way through Philadelphia or Paris, leaving a trail of raised eyebrows and whispered gossip. This is the man who electrified a revolution, but his private life, that's where the real sparks fly. Franklin wasn't just a diplomat and inventor, he was a master of bending rules. Married to Deborah Reed, he spent years gallivanting across Europe, his letters home more polite than passionate. You'd think he'd be loyal, but his notes to other women full of warmth and winks hinted a man who saw fidelity as optional. Some whisper he fathered children abroad, though no one's got receipts. His appetite wasn't just for ideas, it was for life itself, wine, women, and late-night debates that left Puritan jaws on the floor. You can picture him, quill in one hand, glass in the other, grinning like he's cracked the code to freedom and fun. He didn't just break norms, he danced on them. In France, he charmed aristocrats, his bifocals glinting as he spun tales that blurred truth and theatre. Back home, he dodged the rigid morality of his Puritan roots, living like a man who believed rules were for lesser mortals. You've got to admire the Gaul preaching liberty while living so freely it'd make a sailor blush. How do you spark a revolution while juggling secrets? For Franklin, it was simple. Keep the ideas bold, the charm bolder, and the scandals quiet. But in a world of nosy printers and nosier neighbours, secrets have a way of slipping out. You're standing in the flickering glow of a Virginia plantation house, the air heavy with the scent of candle wax and old wood. It's the 1770s, and George Washington, the towering figure of American myth, is pacing his powdered wig slightly askew. Forget the marble statue version. Here's a man wrestling with doubts as heavy as the sword at his hip. You can almost see the worry etched in his face, hidden behind that stoic mask, as he wonders if he's enough to lead a fledgling nation. This is Washington, unpolished, a hero haunted by his own humanity. He's not the fearless commander of legend. Before taking charge of the Continental Army, Washington fretted over his lack of experience, his quill scratching out letters confessing he might not be up to the task. You'd think a man of his stature, 6 foot something, broad-shouldered, all gravitas, wouldn't care about optics, but he obsessed over his image. He burned letters that might dent his legacy, especially those to Sally Fairfax, a friend's wife who stirred his heart before Martha. Those surviving notes drip with longing, all poetic restraint and unspoken passion, hinting at a love he couldn't chase. With Martha, his marriage was steady but formal, their letters more contract than romance. She torched most of their correspondence after his death, as if guarding secrets too raw for history. Then there's his temper, a beast he kept leashed but never tamed. Aides whispered of moments when he'd hurl his hat to the ground, cursing like a sailor when battles went south. You can imagine soldiers freezing, stunned by the outburst from their cool-headed general, and slavery. That's the ugliest shadow. He owned hundreds, profiting from their labour while privately wincing at the moral stain. He freed some in his will, but only after a lifetime of dodging abolition laws, rotating enslaved workers to skirt Pennsylvania's rules. How do you lead a revolution for liberty while chained to such contradictions? For Washington, it was a tightrope walk of duty, doubt, and a legacy he polished with every step. You're in a cramped New England study, the air sharp with ink and the scratch of a quill. It's the late 1700s, and John Adams, the bristly brain of the Revolution, is pouring his soul onto paper for his wife Abigail. He's no marble hero, he's a bundle of brilliance, insecurity, and a tongue sharp enough to slice through Boston fog. You can almost hear his grumbling, a mix of wit and worry, as he wrestles with his place in a world that seems to favour flashier men. This is Adams, raw and real, a man whose heart and ego are in constant tug-of-war. His letters to Abigail, over 100 of them, are a window into a marriage that's more modern than most in his time. They're not just love notes, they're a partnership of equals, full of political rants, fears, and tender devotion. Abigail's his confidant, his advisor, even his conscience, urging him to remember the ladies when shaping the new nation. He leans on her, asking her, take on everything from taxes to traitors. But Adams's ego is a prickly beast. He seethes at Washington's statuesque fame and Franklin's charm, terrified history will forget him. You can feel his pen tremble as he writes of being overshadowed, his ink bleeding envy and ambition. He's not easy to like either. Adams didn't suffer fools, and to him most of Congress was a fool's parade. He feuded with Hamilton, distrusted Jefferson, and alienated half the government with his bluntness. His presidency, a single term, was marred by the Alien and Sedition Acts clamping down on free speech in a way that still stings. Yet he's the only founding father who refused to own slaves, a quiet stand that cost him politically, but not his soul. How do you fight for a nation's ideals when you're your own worst enemy? For Adams, it's with a pen, a wife, and a stubborn heart that never quits even when the world seems to cheer for everyone else. You're in a quiet Virginia study, the air thick with the scent of parchment and the faint creak of a frail man's chair. It's the late 1700s, and James Madison, the pint-sized genius behind the Constitution, is hunched over his desk, his ghostly pallor betraying a body that's more foe than friend. Barely over 5 feet and light as a whisper, he's a walking contradiction, a mind that shaped a nation trapped in a frame that could collapse under a stiff breeze. You can almost feel his worry, the fear that he'll drop dead before his ideas take root. This is Madison, the quiet architect of America, battling his own fragility. His health's a constant shadow. Chronic illnesses, maybe epilepsy, keep him dodging public life for days at a time, recovering in darkened rooms, while colleagues debate in the open. You'd think a man so frail would fade into history's margins, but Madison's brain is a powerhouse. He crafts the Constitution pens Federalist Papers and builds a government's bones while others take the spotlight. He's the guy in the back whispering systems into existence, letting Hamilton and Jefferson soak up the applause. His letters hum with modesty, but there's a quiet dread he's convinced he won't live long enough to see his work matter. Then there's Dolly, his vibrant wife, a whirlwind of charm where Madison's all reserve. You can picture her hosting salons in Washington, her laughter and ice cream turning enemies into allies. She's his public face, making his ideas palatable, while he strategizes in the shadows. But slavery casts a darker shadow. Madison, uneasy with the system, still owns enslaved people wrestling with his conscience, in secret letters that never quite push for change. How do you build a republic of liberty when your own life's built on chains? For Madison, it's a tightrope of genius and guilt, his frail body carrying a nation's weight until depression and doubt pull him under. You're in a smoky Philadelphia tavern, 1776, where the air's alive with rebellion and the clink of mugs. Thomas Paine, a scrappy Englishman with no silver spoon, is scribbling words that'll set a continent on fire. His pamphlet, Common Sense, isn't just a hit. It's a revolution in ink, selling 100,000 copies and yelling independence in plain talk that farmers and smiths can grasp. You can almost hear his voice, rough and urgent, mocking kings and demanding a government for the people. But this firebrand story doesn't end in glory. It's a one-way ticket to exile and oblivion. Paine's no aristocrat. He lands in America at 37, armed with a letter from Franklin and a chip on his shoulder. After Common Sense makes him a hero, he sails to France, cheering their revolution with rights of man. But when the guillotine starts singing, he's horrified, opposing Louis XVI's execution and landing in a Paris prison. A chalkmark dumb luck spares him the blade. Back in America, his pen betrays him again. The Age of Reason. A jab at organised religion brands him an atheist. You can picture the fallout. Washington ignores him. Newspapers mock him, and states strip his voting rights. The man who lit the spark for freedom's now a pariah. By 1809, Paine's alone, broken, buried on a New York farm with 6 mourners at his funeral. You've got to feel the sting his words birthed a nation, but his honesty burned him to ash. No statues, no parades, just a legacy whispered in the margins. How do you change the world when it turns on you? For Paine, it's with a pen that cuts deeper than swords, even if it costs him everything. His exile's a grim reminder. Truth-tellers don't always get the hero's welcome, but their words echo long after the crowd's gone quiet. You're in a bustling Paris salon 1790s, where the air's thick with perfume and the crackle of revolution. Gouverneur Morris, the founding father with a wooden leg and a grin like trouble itself, is charming the room, his cane tapping like a metronome of mischief. He's the guy who penned the constitutions we the people. But forget the dusty patriot. This Morris is a rogue living like he's auditioning for a scandal sheet. You can almost hear the whispers, half admiring, half aghast, as he weaves through aristocrats, an intrigue with the ease of a man who knows rules are just suggestions. Morris lost his leg in a carriage mishap, though some snicker it was from leaping out a jealous husband's window. Either way, he struts like it's a badge of honour, his wooden peg a conversation starter. In France, while the guillotine hums, he's romancing noblewomen, dodging mobs and living like a libertine in a powdered wig. One lover gets caught in the revolutionary purge, another reportedly saves him from a riot. Back home, he's no tamer, racking up mistresses and scandals that make his colleagues' eyes twitch. At 57, he marries his housekeeper Anne Carey Randolph, a woman tangled in her own gossip of abortion and infanticide. You can picture the press losing it, but Morris just shrugs, unfazed by the uproar. What sets him apart? His nerve. He calls slavery a nefarious institution when others stay mum, even pushing unsuccessfully for the Constitution to limit it. His death's as wild as his life legend says. He tried fixing a urinary blockage with a whalebone, a DIY disaster that killed him. You've got to admire the audacity. How do you write a nation's laws while living like a novel's villain? For Morris, it's with a wink, a limp, and a refusal to bow to convention, leaving a legacy as bold and messy as the man himself. You're standing in the smoky halls of Philadelphia 1787, where the founding fathers are hammering out a constitution that promises liberty and justice. The air's thick with ink ambition, and a whiff of contradiction so sharp it could cut parchment. These men, Jefferson, Washington, Madison and more, are crafting a nation's ideals, but their private lives tell a messier story. You can almost hear the quills scratching each stroke, hiding secrets that clash with their lofty words. This isn't just history, it's a mirror to the human flaws behind America's birth. Slavery is the ugliest crack in their armour. They declare all men are created equal while owning hundreds of enslaved people, their plantations thriving on forced labour. Jefferson pens freedom's anthems by day, oversees enslaved workers by dusk. Washington, uneasy, frees some in his will but profits from slavery his whole life. Madison wrestles with it in letters but never breaks the chains. Only Adams stands firm, refusing to own slaves, a lonely moral note in a chorus of compromise. You've got to wonder, how do you preach liberty while living off oppression? Women's rights. Another blind spot. Abigail Adams begs John to remember the ladies, but the Constitution ignores them, leaving women voiceless. Their letters to wives and daughters brim with affection, but legally those women are shadows. Then there's the personal affairs, illegitimate children, secret societies, all cloaked in public virtue. They rail against tyranny abroad, but guard dynastic wealth at home. You can feel the tension, their brilliance tangled in hypocrisy. How do you build a nation on ideals you don't fully live for the founders? It's with grand words and hidden truths, their legacy a paradox that still haunts America's soul. You're curled up in a quiet nook, maybe with a soft breeze from a fan, and the glow of a lamp casting shadows like secrets. Before we dive into the raw, aching love letters of history's giants, hit that like button if you're hooked on stories that bear the soul. Drop a comment too, where are you tuning in from and what's the mood tonight? It's wild to think we're all here, scattered across the world, chasing the heartbeats of the past. Now let's slip into the private worlds of emperors, artists and poets, where love's ink flows as fiercely as their legends. These aren't your typical valentines, all roses and clichés. These letters, penned by Napoleon, Frida Kahlo, Beethoven, and more, are raw, messy confessions written in moments of longing, heartbreak or defiance. You can almost smell the wax seals and feel the tremble in their hands as they poured out devotion, doubt and desperation. They're not just words. They're windows into souls who shaped history but crumbled under love's weight. From battlefields to studios, these figures ruled empires or reshaped art, yet their hearts were as fragile as yours or mine. This tale's about the human side of greatness, where passion outshines power. Picture Napoleon, a conqueror undone by a woman's silence, or Frida Kahlo painting her pain into words for a man who broke her. These letters aren't just relics. They're proof that love with all its chaos binds us across centuries. You're standing at the edge of their private storms where every line's a pulse. How do you love when the world's watching? Let's open these pages and find out one aching word at a time. You're on a dusty battlefield in 1796, the air sharp with gunpowder and the clatter of swords. Napoleon Bonaparte, the young general carving up Italy, is scribbling a letter, his hands stained with ink and ambition. But this isn't a war plan. It's a love letter to Josephine, his new bride, 6 years his senior and twice as elusive. You can almost see him a conqueror in boots, undone by a woman's silence, his words, swinging from passion to paranoia. This is Napoleon not as emperor, but as a man disarmed by love, and it's as messy as any campaign. Their romance was a whirlwind. Married after a brief courtship, Napoleon swept off to war, leaving Josephine in Paris's glittering salons. His letters are raw, almost embarrassing in their need. I awake full of you, he writes, your image and last night's pleasures haunt my senses. You can feel the heat in his words, a mix of longing and desperation, as he begs her not to wash, promising he's racing home. But Josephine, her replies are cool, vague, or just absent. You'd think she'd match his fire, but she's dancing through Paris charming others, while his letters pile up unanswered. The man who'll conquer nations is losing to her indifference. When whispers of her affairs reach him, it's like a cannon shot to the chest. His letters turn darker, accusing her of betrayal while pleading for her love. I'm tormented sleepless. He scrawls his pen, digging into the paper. Even after divorcing her in 1810 for a political marriage, he can't let go. Her portrait stays by his bed in exile, and her name's among his last words at St. Helena. You've got to wonder, how does a man who commands armies kneel to a woman who won't write back? For Napoleon, it's with ink-soaked devotion, a battlefield where love wins every time, even when it breaks him. You're in a vibrant Mexican studio, the air thick with the scent of paint and heartbreak, sometime in the 1930s. Frida Kahlo, the fierce artist with a spine forged in pain, is scrawling a letter to Diego Rivera, the muralist, who's both her muse and her tormentor. Her words aren't just ink, they're blood spilling across the page with love so raw it could crack the canvas. You can almost see her brush in one hand, heart in the other, pouring out a devotion that's as explosive as the colours on her easel. This is Frida loving with a ferocity that defies her broken body. Their marriage is a storm, all passion and betrayal. Diego, 20 years older, a giant in both stature and infidelity, betrays her with lovers, including her own sister. Yet Frida's letters burn with intensity. "Nothing compares to your hands," she writes. "My body is filled with you for days and days." You can feel the ache, her words a mix of worship and wound, calling him her frog-toad in a tender jab that hides the sting of his affairs. They divorce in 1939, remarry a year later. Their bond a cycle of rupture and repair, like a painting never quite finished. Her letters don't beg, they demand his presence, even as her body scarred from a bus accident fights to endure. Frida's pain isn't just physical. It's the war between loving Diego and surviving him. "I ask you for violence in the nonsense," she writes, "and you give me grace, your light, your warmth." You can almost hear her voice sharp and poetic as she turns a heartbreak into art. Her letters are as vivid as her paintings, each line a brushstroke of longing and rage. How do you love someone who breaks you? For Frida, it's with a fire that consumes and creates her words, etching a love story that's as much about survival as it is about surrender. Diego's her oxygen, maddening and vital, and she breathes him in until the end. You're in a dim Vienna room, early 1800s, where the air hums with the ghost of unsung symphonies. Ludwig van Beethoven, the brooding genius whose music shakes the heavens, is hunched over a desk scribbling letters he'll never send. There to his immortal beloved, a woman whose name is lost to time but whose shadow haunts every note he plays. You can almost feel the weight of his pen, each word a chord of longing and loss, as he pours out a love too big for the page. This is Beethoven not as a composer but as a man unravelling in silence. These letters, found after his death in 1827, are raw, unfiltered cries. "My angel, my all, my very self," he writes his words, trembling like a violin strings. "Though still in bed, my thoughts go out to you, my immortal beloved." You can sense the desperation, the ache of a man separated by forces he can't name. Maybe her marriage, his deafness, or a world that keeps them apart. He speaks of obstacles of secrecy, begging her to be calm, love me. Scholars guess at her identity. Antony Brentano, Josephine Brunswick, or maybe Juliette Guicciardi, but the truth stays hidden, a melody unfinished. Beethoven's not known for vulnerability. His other letters snap with curt demands or defiance, but here he's bare his heart, as open as a sonata's crescendo. You've got to wonder, why didn't he send them? Was it fear, pride, or the pain of knowing she might be out of reach? His love's a torment, a muse that fuels his music but leaves him restless. How do you write symphonies for the ages when your heart's stuck on a single note? For Beethoven, it's with ink that sings of longing locked away in a drawer, his greatest love story left to echo in silence. You're in the damp, cold cell of Reading Jail, 1895, where the air smells of mould and despair. Oscar Wilde, once the glittering wit of London's salon, sits hunched over a 50,000-word letter, his pen scratching out a howl from the depths of his soul. It's not a love note, but a requiem written to Lord Alfred Douglas Bosie, the young aristocrat whose love cost Wilde everything. You can almost feel the weight of his words, a mix of anguish, accusation, and unshakable devotion, as he wrestles with the ruin of his life. This is De Profundis, and it's Wilde at his rawest. He starts with grief, but it's not soft. "You came to me to learn the pleasure of life and art," he writes, "but I was chosen to teach you the meaning of sorrow." You can hear the bitterness. Bosie's vanity and selfishness dragged Wilde from champagne to shackles, his conviction for gross indecency, a public crucifixion. Yet he can't stop loving him. Every line swings between fury and worship, blaming Bosie for his downfall, while confessing his own blindness. You're standing in the wreckage of Wilde's world, his fame, fortune and genius burned away by a scandal that shocked Victorian England. But De Profundis is more than a breakup letter. It's a meditation on pain's strange beauty. Wilde sees Christ as the ultimate artist of suffering, his prison cell, a forge for empathy. Where there is sorrow, there is holy ground, he writes his words, carving light from darkness. He sent the letter to Bosie after his release, but their bond was ashes. Wilde died in exile, penniless, his wit silenced. How do you love someone who destroys you? For Wilde, it's with a pen that cuts deeper than prison bars, crafting a masterpiece of heartbreak that outlives them both. You're in a Bloomsbury drawing room, 1920s, where the air hums with the clink of teacups and the weight of unspoken desire. Virginia Woolf, the literary genius with a mind like a river, is writing to Vita Sackville West, a writer and aristocrat whose bold spirit sets her heart alight. Their letters